The one who doesn't do what they say they teach, but they don't live it themselves, is like a candle that provides light to others, but then burns itself out. Literally.
Hi, this is Tanya Hussein. I'm your host on Beat Burnout interview series. Like you, I am a social worker, and I know, like many very dedicated and diligent healthcare professionals and social workers, you get really tired of giving to others because you don't give to yourself. And I managed to beat burnout last year by, for the first time in my life, actually giving to myself. Now, I know we give to God, we give to others in a very big way, but rarely, hardly ever do we give to ourselves. And when I found the world of online coaching, I found how important it is to give to ourselves. Because when we give to ourselves, that's when we can give to others in a much bigger and better way. And we can give to God in a much bigger and better way. And I've brought together top coaches, authors, practitioners, and researchers to share with you how they have beaten burnout, how they give to themselves, and how they give to God. And today, my guest is Mamoon Yusaf. He's the Quran coach and author of Inside the Soul of Islam. He's also the host of British Muslim TV shows such as Quran Coach and Taqwa Transformation. And he's got a powerful message called the Inside Out Paradigm, which I'm very interested in. He's done loads of writing, seminars, programs, and he's a source of inspiration for thousands of Muslims and also a lot of people from other faiths. So I'm really pleased that he's here all the way across. I think where are you in England?
Very pleased to be here. I'm in Manchester right now. So not the most glamorous of locations, but you caught me on a good day. I could have, I travel quite a lot.
All right. So, assalamu alaikum.
Wow.
I'm really interested. How did you get, your journey seems just a little bit that I've said, it seems really interesting. How did you get to be here? How did you get to be doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I've been a personal development coach for about 10 years. And how I got into that originally, as a young man at university, I was studying medicine and really didn't want to be a doctor, but I didn't know how to tell that to my parents. At the time, I also wanted to marry a Spanish girl. Another thing I didn't know how to tell my parents. And so I had all these issues going on and I had all this inner conflict and stuff like that. And I hired a coach. I actually bought an info product, Tony Robbins info product. And I studied it all inside out. And on the inside of it, it said, "Are you still struggling to make changes? If so, call this number." And I was like, wonderful, I'll call the number. And I did. And then they sold me on coaching and I hired a coach. Now, the coach I hired, brilliant, just what I needed at that point in my life. And I started to make some big changes over a relatively short period of time, over about 3 or 6 months of coaching. And at the end of it, I not only made some big decisions, I decided to study Arabic rather than medicine. I decided to, after my degree, I moved to Spain. All these kinds of decisions were made in that short period of time. But there was this reassurance that came with knowing that I could actually choose what I wanted. And not everyone in the world would be happy with it, but that we would develop strategies to deal with everyone's issues, right? And I was like, oh, wow, that's really possible. I guess that's what being a grown-up is, right? But what really struck me was, I was like, wow, this guy has such a cool job because in the space of 3 months, speaking just a couple of times a month, I made some of the biggest decisions of my life. What is that job? Because really, I'd never heard of anyone being a coach ever. In my whole world, that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, what a cool job. How do I, and then I started asking, like, how do I train? How do you become a coach? And then my journey began. I started doing professional development courses from then. A few years later, I was a qualified coach. And I got started working predominantly in the Muslim community when I began my practice. Because I came out with this idea of Quran coaching, which basically is helping people connect the dots between the spiritual teachings of the Quran and their real life problem. Yeah.
Wow. That is just amazing because I think that is definitely sometimes the gap as a social worker I constantly see, that you have all these like problems, everyday problems. They don't have to be big, massive. I'm a trauma coach. It doesn't have to be traumatic like issues all the time, but you have a lot of problems going on and you go to the mosque and you hear the Friday khutbah, but it doesn't seem very relevant to your life.
Yeah.
And you seem to be really bridging that gap, which we feel this void, this vacuum that is just, sometimes you just feel this, where do I take my questions? Where do I take my frustrations? Where do I take my, all these questions and sometimes even pain. So I wanted to ask you something. I know as a social worker, and I know many healthcare professionals, and you've studied medicine or started studying medicine. And I'm sure you can feel that we professionals, we find it really hard to ask for help because we are the help. So we put this mask on that we're like competent and we're okay, because it's embarrassing to actually say that we are struggling with whatever you and I are struggling with. It's fine. It's really difficult. I just wanted to know, from your understanding of the Quran and the work that you do, surely the prophets and spiritual seekers have always asked for help, isn't it? Would you say that the questions are more important? Would you know from your work, how can you make it easy to ask for help? That's my question.
Great question. Great question. And so a few things come to mind here. Firstly, everyone, like in spiritual traditions, there's always a guide and a seeker across the board. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was the guide for a lot of seekers, all of his companions, right? And the next generation had their teachers, and the next generation they would all just know who our spiritual guide is. And whenever we had a problem in life, we would go to them and they would give us the gem of wisdom that would completely transform us from the inside, and we'd all live happily ever after. But I went about 30 years before finding such people in the Islamic tradition. And you might have heard of the odd celebrity author who's a Buddhist or who's from this tradition or that, but it's not that, it doesn't seem as accessible today. But here's a couple of interesting things, because you asked what teachings are there within Islam. The first and foremost is the first chapter of the Quran, which I believe everyone should know about, which is the first page of the Quran, which is Surah Al-Fatiha. And the central line of that is, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. Speaking to Allah, right? And there's this kind of process of, whatever I've got going on, this is too much for me. I'm handing it over to you, Allah. Right? But then the process develops. It's not just saying, okay, Allah is the only one we seek help from, but how does Allah give us that help? Through teachers, through people that we go to seek advice. But interesting thing, the scholar told me, he said, look, you ever notice how we have 5 prayers a day, and it's preferable to do them in congregation, to do them together in a mosque? And he said, do you ever wonder why that is? Because if you think about it, if you're at home alone and you're praying on your own, the chances that you'll be deeply connected and in that right frame of mind to really taste the prayer is increased. If it's the middle of the night and you're on your own, more likelihood you'll feel something special happen during the prayer. And yet it's preferable to go and pray together with everyone else. You ever wonder why that is?
Yes.
Because when you're in congregation, you're with other people. And I've seen it many times in a mosque myself, where you go there every day and there's one person who's happy. Day 1, he's happy. Day 2, he's happy. Day 3, he's happy. Day 4. And at a certain point, you just look at his face and say, oh man, something's up with that, bro. I'm going to go over and speak to him. And then you do. And he's, I've got these issues with my kids or with my parents or with it. And so these real life problems, the reason congregation is so important is so that there's that community there, spiritual community, that we can turn to each other with. This isn't a fail-safe system, because you can go to the mosque and find very unhelpful people too. But that's the idea. Yeah, I think it's essential. Now, there is one other thing I want to say, which is, it's the old saying, right? Healer, heal thyself. And I think the essence, if you've got anything beneficial to give to your clients or your patients, I think it is absolutely essential that you take it in yourself first. Certainly with the mode of psychology that I teach, called the inside out paradigm. You can't teach it. I don't even certify people I don't let anyone teach it unless they live it first.
Yeah. And this is something, being a Muslim myself, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was called the walking Quran.
Yes.
He lived and breathed and showed it. It wasn't a matter of just spouting it. Don't talk the talk, as I say to young people that I work with in the criminal justice system, walk the walk.
Yeah.
And sometimes to be a person of integrity, doing the work, online coaching, I'm a trauma recovery coach, you need to live what you are saying. So be doing this interview series, there's no point me being burnt out doing it.
Sorry to interrupt. I mentioned this in my book, because there was a point where I was burnt out. there's a couple of verses that really struck me. One says, "Why do you say that which you do not do? Why do you recommend to others that which you don't do yourself? Have you no sense?" And then there's this beautiful hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, where he says, I don't want to misquote the Prophet, but hold on a second. It's in my book, chapter 3. Wait a second. I'm going to paraphrase the beginning of it, but the one who doesn't do what they say they teach, but they don't live it themselves, is like a candle that provides light to others, but then burns itself out. Literally. And I was just like, wow, that should be the tagline for 10 Years Program.
Wow. Wow. That is just, that really is so profound, because I sometimes think another author that I came across, Dina Graberman, she actually says, she talks about the joy of burnout. And I'm really interested in your actual burnout story, because
Yeah.
she actually says sometimes you have to be completely burnt out to actually find out what is the joy of life, because what you've been doing all these years isn't working. It's crazy to carry on doing it. And if you don't give to yourself, how can you give to God? How can you give to others? And I'm sure you know about this, the understanding of the word deen usually is translated as religion, but deen actually means to owe. What are the debts you owe to your each relationship? And we always talk about our relationship to God as Muslims, which is very important, but that's just one of the relationships. Your relationship with yourself, your relationship with fellow human beings, like you were talking about, congregation, your relationship with the environment, your relationship with animals, fellow creatures, is so important. And we often neglect how we are to ourselves, the promises we constantly make and we constantly break. I wanted to know, in your life when you were burnt out, could you describe that dark hour, and what was the lowest point that made you seek help?
Yeah. While I was doing Quran coaching, and at the beginning, Quran coaching was really just helping people study the Quran for themselves, because I knew Arabic and I knew that a lot of goal that a lot of Muslims had was to learn Arabic so that they could understand the Quran. So I was doing this for a few years, and because my business was successful, I started helping other coaches grow their businesses too by showing them the kind of how to get clients online. But at a certain point, things weren't going spectacularly well for me personally on a personal level. And it showed up first and foremost in my marriage, my relationship. The Spanish girl I mentioned, we got married in Spain, but I was working 24/7 for very little reward in the beginning, as every entrepreneur does. Secondly, I didn't know how to take care of myself spiritually. I had ideas about it, but again, why do you say that which you don't do? So that was a struggle for me. And then, but really it came out most prevalently. Like I was trying to teach neuro-linguistic programming and things like that, but it was just a stark contrast. Like my own relationship was falling apart. Sure. And at a certain point we got divorced and separated. And then I was living alone in Barcelona, discovered the fact that when you're married to someone, your mutual friends, you find out, oh no, wait, they were all her friends. They weren't. Whoops. Okay. So then I was alone in another country, and that was a breaking point, and I had to start rebuilding myself from scratch. Now, the whole time I was still working with clients. Most of my work is online. So through the divorce, nobody knew about my relationship situation. Nobody knew about the marriage at the time, but I was beat up on the inside. I was helping people grow their businesses during that whole period. I didn't do relationship coaching during that time. I'm not that free, but I did do business coaching and a little bit of Quran coaching and that kind of thing. I went on a journey. I went seeking. The thing you were saying about the joy of burnout, there's a beautiful line from Maulana Rumi, who is, many people know Rumi, right? He said, if the heart does not break open, how will the light enter? Almost like you have to reach the point of complete breakdown. You don't have to, but many people do. Complete breakdown in order to just open yourself up to divine light. And that's what ultimately heals you, right? So 9 months into this, and I was searching, I went to coaches, and at one point I spoke with an Indian guru and I don't care who, where, what background, just anybody who might have answers for me. And I bumped into a coach who shared something with me, which really was the gem that healed me from my own burnout, and then eventually turned into my life's work, which I think is probably a common story, right? When you face something really tough yourself, whatever helps you through it, that often becomes a thing that you share with others. For me, that was the inside out paradigm.
Could you, I know you've
Yeah.
said that you've got to walk it, you've got to live it.
Yeah.
And it's just something that my business coach, Shanda Sumter, is actually saying that a lot of us, we're constantly wanting to get more clients and serve more clients. But if you're not doing it from a place of service, from a place of giving, from that place of generosity, it's going to show through. You might be saying something, but your spirit and your whole energy is saying something else. You're deflated.
Absolutely.
And as an entrepreneur, you're going to have many failures on the way. You're going to have many points that you're going to think, what in the hell am I doing? And what I wanted to ask you was, what is the inside out paradigm? And can you give me a specific example to show our
Absolutely.
audience?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what it is, and then maybe my own story of burnout will be the example. But so the inside out in a nutshell, so I'm going to tell you the whole story, right? I was searching and I randomly contacted a coach, and then we had a phone call. And I told him my story. I was like, look, I'm single. I'm in Barcelona. I feel guilty because of the breakup. I've been depressed for the last few months, beating myself up all the time. I'm angry about the way things turned out, but at the same time, I feel a lot of freedom. And I told him all this, and he said, oh, okay. Well, your feeling is coming from your thinking, right? And I was like, yeah, of course I know that. I'm a coach. And he said, 100% of everything you're feeling right now in this moment is coming from your thinking. It's not coming from the divorce. It's not coming from the breakup. It's not coming from the people you're hanging out with. It's not coming from the work that you're doing. The only place it's coming from, 100% of your feeling is coming from your thinking right now in this moment. That I went so quiet. I had nothing to, because for the first time, it really struck me like, whoa, all of the pain is thought. All of the heartbreak is thought. And it isn't caused by someone else. It's caused by thought, my own thought. And I just went quiet. I was like, this was the first time I'd heard of mindfulness and tried doing it, but I didn't try to be mindful. My head just went quiet. And that's what they say insight is. Insight is when the ego collapses over a particular subject. And this inner voice has nothing left to say. It's just, well, that. I was like, wow, all of it, all of my pain was coming from thoughts in the moment. I had all these stories about what it was about. I thought it was about the last girl I talked with, or the conflict I had with a friend, or the breakup, or I was playing stories about how hard it must be for my ex. All of this kind of stuff was all just in my head. So I realized all of that pain, all of the struggle was really just thought in the moment. And I was like, all right, I don't know what you're selling, but whatever it is, I'm signing up. I'm coming to your next retreat. He's like, okay, great. Speak to my assistant. I talked to the assistant, 10 grand. Okay, here you go. My life savings there. Let's do it. Went to a 5-day retreat. And then we just went deeper because obviously I kind of, I guess you could say spiritually experienced the truth of what he was saying, but my logic hadn't caught up. After all that years of NLP training and coach training, I was like, yeah, but what about the past? And what about hypnosis regression? And what about, I had all these questions, but after a 5-day retreat, I was like, okay, no, this is for real. This is for real. So my burnout instant. So yeah, I'll tell you something that might sound unbelievable, but it's true. So I'm going to say it. Inner change doesn't take time.
No.
It takes insight. The entire transformation happened for me in the space of about 10 seconds. And I came out of it and my logical mind was still ticking and stuff, but we just answered some of those logical questions. And that's it. I was good. And then when I started looking, and by the way, that sentence, you're always living in the feeling of your thinking moment by moment. That is the inside of the paradigm.
Wow.
You're always living in the feeling of your thinking moment by moment, right? That's the whole inside out. And that's an absolute truth. It might take people a while to realize that that's absolutely true, but just test it out in your own experience. When you're mad, you're thinking mad. When you're sad, you're thinking sad. And when you're angry, you can't think love and feel hate, can't think hate and feel. It doesn't work that way. Thought and feeling are inextricably bound. What that does is it takes the target off all the things in the outside world you thought you needed to change in order to feel okay. They're like, oh no, wait, it's thought. It becomes an inner thing, and then it becomes a spiritual thing. It becomes and we're not broken. You might feel burnt out, but you're not broken. You don't need fixing. You just need to realize where your experience is coming from, which is from inside you, from thought, from consciousness, from mind, from this, or this, should I say.
And it's all what you're describing is so powerful. It's all very integrated because there's the mind, there's the soul, there's the heart, there's the body. And sometimes we split it all up.
Yeah.
And like we go to the doctor, we go to that healthcare professional and we say, fix me. My story is my blood pressure went out of control. Even medication wasn't controlling it. I nearly destroyed my health.
Yeah.
No, and yet I was still going to work. The crazy thing, I was still going to a very stressful job and turning up at work. I could not stop. Everybody else was saying to me,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? But I was turning up and I could not stop. And I remember praying and actually saying, all I know is I want a purposeful life. I don't know what my purpose is, but I want a purposeful life. And that insight that there's something wrong, it was very dark, yet I just felt I couldn't carry on, and I needed to acknowledge the fact that I couldn't carry on and slow down and have afternoon naps and give myself permission to stop, because I'd never allowed myself to stop. And that power of thought, they actually say that, no, you can't literally move mountains, but you can move metaphorical mountains.
Yeah, and I don't split those things. When I say thought, what is thought? Thought is a spiritual gift that lets you see your way through life. Mind, consciousness, and thought, it is your soul. Those things together are the thing that God gave us that made us, in my belief system, anyway.
And I think you are talking about the holisticness of faith. Islam is very holistic, as is Buddhism, as is Christianity, as is Judaism. I also wanted to know, what strategies do you use to beat burnout? Because burnout can come back.
Yeah. So to speak to both the things you just said, psychology is the logic of the psyche. Psychology. And what is the psyche? It's the soul. And psychology, in its inception, the aim of psychology was to understand this thing called the soul, the human spirit. But that exploration stopped as the world became more, secular, and religion is all just myths and stuff like that. So it's the exploration of the soul stopped. But I think that was a big mistake, because consciousness is a thing, right? You can't touch it, but we know it's there. Thought, we can't touch it, but we know it's there. Mind, we can't touch it, but we know it's there. Now, if we look at it from a perspective of, let's try and understand the universal logic that underpins the human psyche. That's what the inside out is. That's where it comes from. That's what the idea behind it is. Now, in modern day terms, what we've done is, because the exploration of the psyche, that was a dead end, because they were like, oh, hang on, we don't know. We're just looking at the physical body and we don't know anything about the psyche. Let's leave that to for another century or something, right? The result was to start looking at behavior, right? And you get like cognitive behavioral therapy and neurolinguistic programming, all that kind of stuff. So I was very much a behavioralist before, when I originally started out. But when I discovered the inside out, I was like, oh no, there is something deeper here. And when I discovered there's something deeper, then spirituality and religion and psychology and all of it just became one clear thing to me. So when you ask for strategies to beat burnout, for me, there's only one strategy, which is to take a deep and serious exploration of the inside out. You know why? Because if what I'm saying is true, that our feeling and our experience is always coming from thought in the moment, then it means it's never not coming from thought. When you're burnt out, the let's just say if the paradigm of the inside out is that your feeling comes from thought in the moment, the paradigm of burnout is the illusion that something other than your own thought is causing your feeling moment by moment. What might that something other be? It might be, I have to go to work, as you were saying before, I have to go to work because I've got bills to pay, and if I don't pay the bills or if my income reduces, then I won't be able to da, 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 da. And then all of a sudden, it's like my feelings are depending on a financial outcome. For everyone, it's something different. Or for some people, it's not being able to talk to their boss, or not being able to ask for time off, or not being able to. Why is that? If you're afraid of talking to your boss, you're afraid of talking to your boss. All of our fears, all of our emotional fears anyway, are fears of feeling a certain way. I don't want to feel humiliated by the boss. I don't want to feel rejection. We're afraid of feeling a certain way. Now, when we realize that we only ever feel thinking, then all of a sudden, like if we're afraid of feeling a certain way, but we're only ever going to feel our thinking, you're thinking anyway. What is there to be afraid of? You're always thinking something, right? So this understanding, it goes a lot deeper. And what it did for me is it resolved a lot of the hang-ups and issues, and it resolved the source. It got to the root of what was burning me out and took it away. Because what burns us out is an illusion. And the nature of an illusion is it doesn't really exist. Now, you don't need to put a strategy in place to fix an illusion that didn't exist in the first place. You see what I mean? But this is my approach, is if you can really deeply see that it's an illusion, that anything other than your own thinking could cause you feeling, you don't need strategies anymore. You don't need, and that's probably the biggest noticeable distinguishing feature from the inside out to most other things is I'm not going to tell you you got to meditate every day or you got to pray every day. As a Muslim, I might say, hey, I'm a fan of praying 5 times a day, but you don't need that. In fact, this is a mistake even Muslims make when we pray. We think that I need to pray in order to feel okay. Then you're praying for the wrong reason. You shouldn't be needing to pray in order to feel okay and then pray. You'll be so overwhelmed. When you get the inside out, you'll be so overwhelmed with gratitude for how okay and how whole you feel that you might just want to devote yourself through prayer. But it's not a needy prayer anymore. It's a genuine prayer. It's a prayer of gratitude.
And sometimes if we also just look at prayer in a different way, it's about unchaining ourselves from the desk, and we got to do this, living in the future, living like, oh my God, I haven't done this, looking at the past. And you could unchain yourself. You take the prayer mat out, or you do your meditation if you're from a different faith, and you connect yourself to the here and now, your thoughts, your feelings, to the present. And it's just having that time away from the future, from the past, to the here and now, and just being present with yourself, with God. And you're going to probably feel okay afterwards.
Yeah. And what I love about this idea of presence, of being in the now, if you want eternal paradise, fully immerse yourself into this moment. If you want eternal paradise, fully immerse yourself into this moment. And here's a beautiful thing, is when we're present, our mind is, when you're in this state of thoughtlessness, your mind is quiet. But what that really means is you're open to insight. And we're transformed through insight. A lot of people, they hear about presence and then they try to be present all the time. And then before long, you're beating yourself up for not being present enough, or you try meditating and then you're beating yourself up because you lost concentration in meditation. That's not the point. The point of presence isn't presence itself. The Buddha, I have a Buddhist friend, and he said that the Buddha, may he rest in peace, said that the meditation is a ship that's sailing on the ocean. And the aim is that the ship will take you to the shore of wisdom. So it's not meditation itself, not presence itself, but that when you're in this state of presence, your mind is now open to wisdom. And the insight that I described earlier that completely transformed my burnout, that was an insight. That's inner wisdom, a sight from within. From your own consciousness, the realization comes. So that's why I don't say, okay, there has to be a practice of meditation or this or that. They're all wonderful. And if you want to experience them all, that's great. But don't buy into the outside-in illusion that I have to meditate every day in order for me to be okay. You don't. You're okay anyway, because you're only feeling your thinking, right? But the benefit of doing those things, and the point of prayer in Islam, is that prayer, it looks different to meditation. You're standing in a certain posture. you're reciting certain words or listening to them. So what's the point there? The point there is with a quiet mind, when you hear those multi-layered, incredibly wise words, it might just trigger an insight that transforms you permanently. And that's why, even you were saying before, you might go to a mosque and the imam is preaching, but what he's saying has no relevance. A lot of the Quran seems at first superficial examination to have no relevance. It's talking about God. Most of it is talking about God, right? It's talking about these people who lived hundreds or thousands of years ago and all these things. But that's not the point. The point is, if you listen carefully, if you listen deeply, if you listen with a quiet mind, then the words themselves, the stories, the way things are phrased is profound. It can lead to profound spiritual insight, which is why that's where Rumi got it from. Maulana Rumi, rahimahullah. That's where Hafiz got it from. That's where Saadi got it from. Like these great people who's, even after translating and even butchering the translations of their original works, they're still so impactful for so many people today. And it's because they were inside out. They never called it that, but that they were coming from this place of knowing that the source of their experience is spiritual.
I could talk to you all day, Mamoon, and I'm sure people that have been watching have got so much out of this. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I have a great admiration for all of the healers and the aid workers and people who are just in the helping people profession. I have a great admiration for them. And there's nothing I want more than for them to have an understanding that would just take the weight off and take the struggle out of your work. I have a friend who's an aid worker, and he came to one of my seminars, and I probably should have told this story earlier. He was seriously burnt out, seriously. And he was very angry because he was doing aid work in Greece with refugees that came, and the way people treated them, he was very angry. At the end of the seminar, he was completely at peace. He decided he was never going back to do that kind of aid work again. But at the end of the seminar, he was ready to go. And literally a week later, he went back to Greece and started working with Syrian refugees. So this is powerful. When you get this understanding, like the pressure on you and the weight on you and the sense of burnout that we're talking about, it doesn't have to be there. You don't have to live in a world where it's there. And if my book helps, I'm sure it will. It's helped many people, but please do check it out.
Thank you so much.